Picture a highly familiar, yet deeply unsettling digital scenario. It is late at night. You are mindlessly scrolling through your social media feed, feeling the heavy weight of a long, exhausting day, or perhaps carrying the silent, invisible burden of a recent personal setback. Suddenly, the algorithmic feed halts you with an intense, emotionally charged video. The screen displays a solemn image, accompanied by dramatic, swelling music and a voiceover that immediately isolates your attention. Jesus is weeping and endeavoring to reach you right now. This message is intended solely for you. The narrator urgently insists that this is an exclusive, sacred interruption orchestrated by heaven itself, warning that if you disregard it for even a single second, you risk losing a life-altering miracle. In that highly vulnerable fraction of a moment, your critical thinking pauses and your emotional reflexes take over. You stop. You listen. What you have just stumbled upon is not a genuine spiritual awakening or a serendipitous divine revelation. Instead, it is a prime example of a rapidly growing and highly toxic epidemic on the internet, the weaponization and commercialization of spirituality. Across various social platforms, there is an alarming surge of pseudo-religious content meticulously engineered to target society's most vulnerable demographics: the deeply lonely, the financially desperate, the chronically ill, and the emotionally broken. These content creators exploit sacred symbols, theological language, and absolute faith, masking aggressive digital marketing tactics beneath the comforting guise of divine benevolence. They speak of impending tragedies, secret enemies, and withheld miracles, capitalizing on raw human despair to farm algorithmic engagement, inflate their digital reach, and ultimately drive lucrative monetization. This digital phenomenon is far from accidental. It is, in fact, a highly sophisticated, multi-layered, psychological manipulation funnel disguised as a pastoral blessing. By meticulously dissecting the script of one such viral message, this article will expose how these invisible creators systematically hijack human emotions. We will explore the anatomy of their fear-inducing hooks, the calculated use of a faux authoritative spiritual tone, the deployment of behavioral psychology tactics to isolate the viewer, and the final, predatory conversion process that turns desperate faith into tangible financial profit. Understanding this architecture of exploitation is the crucial first step to reclaiming your mental and spiritual autonomy in an increasingly predatory online landscape. The digital age is a ruthless battleground for human attention, and the architects of these spiritual manipulation campaigns know they possess mere seconds to capture their prey. To bypass the viewer's natural skepticism, the content is engineered to shatter emotional defenses immediately. This is achieved through a carefully calculated three-pronged hook, designed not to inform, but to neurologically hijack the audience. To stop a user from scrolling, the video must first short-circuit the brain's rational processing center. It does this by deploying the tactic of extreme, artificial urgency. The script aggressively warns the viewer that if they disregard even 1 second, they risk losing their divine connection eternally. It goes further by imposing a highly specific, high-stakes deadline, claiming that what is coming in 30 minutes will absolutely shock you. From a neurological standpoint, this is a targeted attack on the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for logic, skepticism, and rational decision-making. By introducing an immediate, catastrophic threat tightly bound to a ticking clock, the content artificially induces a state of fight or flight. When the amygdala, the brain's fear center, is activated by this sudden panic, the viewer loses the cognitive bandwidth to step back and question the absurdity of a generic social media post, predicting a life-altering event exactly 30 minutes away. The countdown acts as a psychological tripwire, paralyzing the scroll finger and holding the viewer captive through sheer anxiety. They are compelled to stay, terrified of what will happen if the arbitrary timer runs out. Once the viewer is frozen by urgency, the hook deepens its hold by stroking the ego through false exclusivity. Despite being broadcast to millions of users via an indifferent, data-driven algorithm, the text explicitly and intimately declares, "This message is intended solely for you." It insists that the viewer is not encountering the video by mere chance, but rather because heaven orchestrated this sacred interruption so they could learn secrets no one else had ever been privileged to. No, this exploits a profound human psychological vulnerability, the desperate desire to feel special, seen, and chosen. The modern digital world is profoundly isolating, leaving many individuals feeling like anonymous, invisible cogs. By telling the viewer that they are receiving a personalized, divine broadcast, the creators hack the viewer's sense of significance. The algorithmic reality is erased. The individual is suddenly the protagonist of a cosmic, high-stakes narrative. This illusion drastically lowers defensive barriers, because people are naturally more receptive and trusting toward messages that validate their unique importance and destiny. The final, most insidious layer of the hook is the weaponization of guilt and the implicit threat of spiritual abandonment. The narrative relies heavily on evocative, emotionally manipulative imagery of divine suffering, repeatedly emphasizing that Jesus is weeping right at this very moment because of the viewer. The text paints a tragic picture of a grieving heaven, mourning over how close the individual came to walking away from their soul's ultimate destiny. This is a textbook form of spiritual extortion. It takes the core, comforting tenets of faith, compassion, divine love, and sacrifice, and twists them into coercive weapons. The viewer is made to feel that scrolling past the video is not just a passing, mundane choice, but an act of profound betrayal that causes literal agony to a supreme being. The script explicitly claims that Jesus is reaching out through tears and begging the viewer not to disregard the message. By framing the simple act of swiping away as a devastating moral failure, the creators trap the viewer in a psychological cage of artificial guilt. The threat is clear and terrifying. If you leave, a tragedy will be set in motion, and it will be entirely your fault because you ignored the tears of heaven. This toxic blend of fear, obligation, and guilt guarantees that the emotionally compromised viewer will stay anchored to the screen, ready to absorb whatever manipulation comes next. To effectively bypass a viewer's natural skepticism, the creator of this content cannot simply speak as an ordinary internet user. They must construct a meticulously crafted, unassailable persona. Through calculated linguistic choices and emotional posturing, the author establishes a false identity that commands both absolute submission and deep, unearned trust. To make the manipulation seamless, the creator must establish undeniable credibility. They achieve this not by presenting verifiable facts, but by hijacking the ultimate spiritual authority. The narrator boldly sheds human identity, explicitly declaring, "I, Archangel Michael, was instructed to intervene." Furthermore, they position themselves as a direct conduit for the divine, stating, "I am standing here to speak for him." By usurping the identity of a major biblical figure and acting as the official mouthpiece for Jesus, the author exploits a profound psychological vulnerability rooted in obedience to authority. Much like the subjects in the classic Milgram experiment, who deferred to researchers in lab coats out of an innate respect for perceived expertise, viewers are conditioned to submit to absolute spiritual power. The text reinforces this by claiming to deliver decrees straight from heaven's courts, and revealing that God overruled the delay regarding the viewer's destiny. When a message is framed as an urgent, top-tier mandate from the divine realm, questioning its validity feels not just skeptical, but inherently blasphemous. This borrowed absolute authority strips the viewer of their critical defenses, forcing them to accept absurd premises simply because the authoritative, commanding tone demands their immediate compliance. Beyond strict, booming authority, the text cultivates a deeply intimate, yet fiercely hierarchical, relationship with the audience. This is executed through the incessant rhythmic repetition of the phrase, "My child, my beloved." This specific choice of address acts as a calculated psychological anchor. On one hand, it establishes a massive power distance. The speaker is an all-knowing, omnipotent guardian, while the viewer is positioned as a helpless, fragile subordinate in need of saving. On the other hand, it perfectly mimics the unconditionally loving tone of an idealized parental figure. For individuals suffering from severe loneliness, emotional neglect, or recent trauma, this faux intimacy is incredibly seductive. The narrator validates their silent struggles, claiming to have watched them when they cried quietly, and assuring them that God heard every silent prayer. By framing their aggressive manipulation in the gentle language of unconditional love and divine protection, the creator effectively disarms the viewer. It becomes nearly impossible for a vulnerable person to recognize that they are being exploited when their exploiter is constantly reassuring them of their beloved status and infinite worth. The final pillar of this manipulative persona is the construction of an impenetrable terminology matrix. The script is heavily saturated with mystical jargon and pseudo-theological buzzwords designed to sound incredibly profound. The narrator speaks ominously of a divine reversal, a spiritual contract that was signed against the viewer, and a sacred document sealed with heaven's fire. They warn of unseen warfare and promise that a prophetic alignment is currently taking place. This dense, esoteric vocabulary serves a specific, malicious function. It creates an intellectual fog. When a viewer is bombarded with heavy, abstract concepts that sound biblical but lack actual, coherent theological substance, their cognitive processing becomes overwhelmed. The message appears excessively deep and beyond ordinary human comprehension. Because the terminology sounds sophisticated, urgent, and sacred, the viewer assumes it must hold absolute truth, even if they cannot fully grasp its meaning. This linguistic smoke and mirrors masks the underlying emptiness of the video, ensuring that the audience remains entranced by the sheer weight of the words, rather than critically analyzing the content's manipulative intent. Once the creator has successfully hooked the viewer's attention and established a terrifyingly authoritative persona, they must sustain that engagement. The internet is full of distractions, so holding a viewer captive for an extended period requires a sophisticated system of behavioral control. This section of the text is not merely a spiritual message. It is a meticulously constructed psychological matrix designed to exploit cognitive biases, stroke fragile egos, and isolate the victim from reality. One of the most powerful tools in the manipulator's arsenal is the Barnum effect, a psychological phenomenon where individuals believe that generic personality descriptions or life events apply specifically to them. The script relies heavily on this technique, casting a wide net of relatable human experiences while framing them as highly classified divine secrets. The author throws out emotionally loaded scenarios that almost every adult has faced. For instance, the narrator claims to have witnessed moments when the viewer gazed at the ceiling, wondering why God kept you here. They speak of times when everything around the viewer felt like it was crumbling, yet they persisted and got back up. By referencing universal feelings of exhaustion and existential doubt, the creator tricks the viewer's brain. The viewer maps their own specific, painful memories onto these vague statements, convincing themselves that the archangel is truly reading their soul. Furthermore, the text expertly targets universal desires and common grievances. It promises a delayed financial breakthrough that has finally been released in the viewer's name, claiming there is a very specific amount of money that forces were fighting over. It also touches on the universal pain of betrayal, asserting that a covenant contains a list of promises held back by delay, betrayal, and sabotage. Because everyone has experienced financial stress or relational disappointment at some point, these generic claims feel astoundingly accurate. This illusion of specificity creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. The viewer desperately wants the promised financial relief and emotional vindication, so they eagerly accept the manipulative premise as absolute truth. To keep the victim emotionally invested, the manipulator must feed their sense of self-importance. This is achieved by weaponizing the chosen one trope, a narrative device that flatters the viewer into submission. People who are drawn to these videos often feel marginalized, unsuccessful, or unseen in their daily lives. The text aggressively flips this narrative, turning their real-world failures and isolation into undeniable proof of spiritual greatness. The narrator explicitly tells the viewer that this is not a general message, but one that only reaches the person who has been marked for something truly extraordinary. When addressing the viewer's history of hardship, the text provides a highly flattering rationalization. It claims that the viewer was never meant to be ordinary, which is exactly why the pain in their life has never been ordinary. This reframing is a brilliant piece of toxic positivity. Instead of dealing with the practical realities of their struggles, the viewer is told that their pain is a badge of honor, a sign that they have been chosen in a way few others will ever comprehend. The text also targets the viewer's feelings of loneliness, a common symptom of modern depression and social anxiety. The narrator validates this isolation by claiming it was not the viewer's imagination, but rather a divine sign that they were being pulled away to be prepared, stating that isolation is often the prelude to elevation. By convincing the viewer that their suffering is actually a grand spiritual test and that their blessings arrive with a battle, the creator traps them in a cycle of ego validation. The victim becomes addicted to the narrative because it makes them feel inherently superior and cosmically important, effectively blinding them to the exploitation happening right in front of them. Cult leaders and abusers systematically isolate their victims to maintain total control. In the digital space, this is achieved by sowing seeds of intense paranoia regarding the viewer's real-life social circle. If the viewer trusts their family and friends, they might share the video and be warned that it is a scam. To prevent this, the creator preemptively poisons the viewer's relationships. The script introduces a sinister, unseen enemy lurking in the viewer's immediate vicinity. The narrator warns of a person near them who recently smiled at you, but whose heart conceals something heavy and whose intentions were not sent by heaven. The text goes on to claim that this person has studied the viewer's gentleness, but their spirit is tainted with jealousy, secretly whispering lies while smiling in their presence. To make the threat even more concrete, the script later specifies that there is a woman who once smiled at you and called you family, who harbors a secret blocking their blessings. This is a devastating psychological tactic. By planting these vague but terrifying accusations, the creator forces the viewer to mentally scan their life, casting suspicion on co-workers, friends, and family members. Did a sister smile strangely today? Did a female friend offer a backhanded compliment? The victim begins to view their actual support network as a nest of jealous betrayers. As paranoia sets in, the viewer becomes socially isolated, concluding that the only entity they can truly trust is the divine voice speaking through the video. This artificially induced isolation ensures the victim remains wholly dependent on the manipulator for guidance and validation. While the psychological tactics described above manipulate the viewer's mind, The ultimate goal of the video is highly algorithmic, maximizing watch time and engagement metrics. Social media platforms reward content that keeps users on the platform longer. To achieve this, the creator essentially takes the viewer's promised miracles hostage, demanding continuous attention as the ransom. Throughout the text, the viewer is repeatedly subjected to emotional terrorism if they even consider clicking away. The narrator issues strict commands, telling the viewer to stay and read every single word. The threats attached to leaving are severe and absolute. The script warns that if the viewer walks away even for just a second, what was supposed to be a celebration could transform into heartbreak. It claims that skipping the message might cause the divine seal to be closed again, requiring an unnamed sacrifice for any angel to reopen it. The creator goes as far as to weaponize the viewer's future blessings. The text claims that a specific person meant to unlock their destiny is about to step forward. But if the viewer abandons the message, the signal will be disrupted, and this divine helper may never find you in time. The narrator insists that the viewer must not walk away from the message until it is finished, because leaving halfway means they leave your blessing incomplete. This has absolutely nothing to do with spiritual enlightenment or divine instruction. It is a calculated, algorithmic hack. By instilling the paralyzing fear that checking a text message, going to the bathroom, or swiping to the next video will literally destroy their destiny and cancel their financial breakthrough, the creator forces the viewer to sit through the entire duration of the content. This maximizes the video's retention rate, signaling to the algorithm that the content is highly engaging, which in turn pushes the manipulative video to millions of other vulnerable feeds. The victim is not experiencing a spiritual awakening. They are being utilized as free labor to farm algorithmic data for a digital con artist. The psychological manipulation detailed in the previous sections is not an end in itself. It is the wide mouth of a highly optimized digital marketing funnel. The ultimate objective of this pseudo-spiritual content is not to save souls, but to convert emotional vulnerability into measurable engagement and financial revenue. To achieve this, the creator employs a series of escalating demands, beginning with what marketers and behavioral psychologists call micro-commitments, before eventually making aggressive financial asks. The script gently introduces physical actions under the guise of spiritual alignment. The narrator instructs the viewer that liking this video will activate the flow of God's favor in your life, and frames this click as a simple act that aligns you with heaven's blessings. Shortly after, the stakes are raised slightly, urging the viewer to declare your amen in the comments below to ensure their voice rises in agreement with heaven's decree. This relies heavily on the foot in the door psychological principle. By convincing the viewer to agree to a small, seemingly cost-free action, clicking a thumbs-up icon or typing a four-letter word, the creator subtly breaks down their initial resistance. Once the victim complies with these minor directives, they subconsciously align themselves with the authority figure. They transition from passive viewers to active participants in the ritual. Simultaneously, this serves a dual, purely capitalistic purpose. These likes and comments act as high-value algorithmic signals. Each amen, typed by a desperate viewer, effectively acts as free advertising, signaling to the platform's algorithm that the content is highly engaging, thereby pushing the manipulative trap onto the screens of thousands of new potential victims. Once the viewer has been conditioned to obey minor commands, the creator escalates the pressure by introducing strict time controls to force more significant algorithmic commitments. The script explicitly commands the audience, "Take 3 seconds now and click subscribe." This is not a polite request. It is framed as a matter of spiritual life and death. The narrator insists that this rapid action is necessary to activate God's prophetic promise and alignment in your life, and warns the viewer not to let the miracle pass them by, adding ominously that heaven is watching how you respond. By imposing an incredibly tight 3-second deadline, the creator weaponizes panic to bypass the viewer's rational judgment. In this microscopic window of time, the brain cannot evaluate the legitimacy of the channel or the absurdity of the claim. Instead, clicking the subscribe button becomes an instinctual reflex of self-defense, a desperate attempt to secure the promised blessings and avoid divine punishment. This forced action ensures that the victim is permanently tethered to the creator's digital ecosystem, guaranteeing that they will be fed a continuous stream of future manipulative content, keeping them trapped in a cycle of fear and dependency. The culmination of this intricate psychological matrix is the final, ultimate conversion, the extraction of physical wealth. After systematically breaking down the viewer's defenses, isolating them through paranoia, and trapping them with algorithmic threats, the creator unveils the true purpose of the message. The funnel leads directly to the victim's wallet. The script transitions seamlessly from offering vague spiritual comfort to making explicit financial demands, encouraging the viewer to give to the work through the link in the pinned comment, whether by buying a coffee, making a donation, or becoming a member of our exclusive community. To mask this blatant cash grab, the creator employs aggressive cognitive reframing, heavily borrowing from the toxic tenets of the prosperity gospel. They explicitly attempt to distance the transaction from mere earthly commerce, insisting that the money does not go to a channel, but instead supports a divine mission to save lost souls. The act of handing over money is rebranded as the ultimate test of faith. The narrator boldly declares, "The money you give today is not a donation. The act of spiritual obedience that lets your heavens open is what opens them." By equating a credit card transaction with spiritual obedience, the creator exploits the victim's deepest vulnerabilities, convincing them that they can literally purchase their way out of suffering. The manipulation reaches its peak when the text urges the viewer to let go of your seed and see what God brings back into your life. This transactional theology implies a divine return on investment, preying on those who are financially desperate by promising that giving their last dollars to this internet stranger will unlock the divine vault. By telling a victim whose life is falling apart that they must give and it will be given to you, the creator ruthlessly drains the very individuals who are least equipped to lose their money. The creator further incentivizes this extortion by pushing an exclusive community or Archangel Michael's inner circle, turning spiritual guidance into a tiered subscription model hidden behind a paywall. The viewer is promised immediate early access to powerful content and divine insights that are hidden from the general world. Ultimately, this reveals the grim reality of the content. It is a highly calculated financial scam. It commodifies hope, holding a person's peace of mind, future prosperity, and spiritual salvation ransom for a coffee donation or a monthly membership fee, proving that the only entity truly benefiting from this divine intervention is the creator's bank account. The highly orchestrated digital manipulation detailed in the preceding sections does not exist in a vacuum. It leaves a profound trail of real-world devastation. While these videos may seem like harmless, albeit bizarre, algorithmic anomalies to the skeptical observer, they carry severe social and psychological consequences for those who fall into their traps. By treating human despair as a monetizable commodity, these creators inflict lasting damage on their audiences. To understand the impact of this content, one must first recognize who is actually watching it. The individuals who fall prey to these digital funnels are rarely lacking in intelligence. Rather, they are experiencing acute emotional or financial distress. The algorithm efficiently targets those who are grieving, drowning in debt, battling chronic illnesses, or suffering from severe depression. The script is explicitly tailored for this demographic, addressing viewers who have gazed at the ceiling, wondering why God kept you here, and those who are desperately awaiting a financial breakthrough. By promising that a specific amount of money is being released and that delays are finally broken, the creator preys on the financially ruined. When a person is operating from a place of sheer survival, their cognitive defenses are lowered. The creators of this content are digital predators, scanning the digital savannah for the weakest, most exhausted members of the herd and offering them a beautiful, fatal illusion of immediate rescue. The psychological toll on the victims is profound and often cyclical. As viewers become deeply entrenched in this pseudo-spiritual ecosystem, they develop a severe psychological dependence on the content. The videos promote a dangerous brand of toxic positivity and magical thinking, suggesting that real-world problems can be solved simply by declaring an Amen or typing a yes to shift spiritual timelines. Consequently, victims often abandon practical, real-world efforts to improve their circumstances. Why apply for a job, seek medical treatment, or attend therapy when an archangel has promised that a spiritual inheritance and full restoration of their finances and health are arriving within days? Furthermore, the system is rigged to blame the victim. The script warns that if the viewer allows distraction to steal their attention, or if they walk away, their gift will return to heaven's vault. When the promised miracles inevitably fail to materialize, the victim does not blame the scammer, they blame themselves for lacking faith or missing a digital sign. This deeply exacerbates their initial depression and anxiety, trapping them in a loop of false hope and crushing disappointment. Perhaps the most insidious social consequence of this manipulation is the deliberate destruction of the victim's real-life support systems. As analyzed earlier, the creator intentionally sows paranoia, warning the viewer that people in their circle who smiled in your presence have secretly whispered lies, and that a trusted woman is concealing a secret to block their blessings. When a vulnerable person internalizes these warnings, they become hypervigilant and distrustful of their actual friends, family, and caregivers. If a concerned relative attempts to point out that the victim is being scammed or manipulated by these videos, the victim perceives this intervention not as an act of love, but as a spiritual attack. They view their loved ones as the very enemies. The video warned them about people who doubt their calling or try to redirect their miracle. This results in fractured families and severe social isolation. Cut off from reality and the people who genuinely care for them, the victim becomes entirely dependent on the faceless digital manipulator, effectively trapped in a high-control digital cult of one. Ultimately, the digital phenomenon we have dissected is not a manifestation of divine grace, but a masterclass in psychological predation. The script we analyze demonstrates exactly how sacred concepts are weaponized to hijack attention, isolate vulnerable viewers, and extract financial gain. It is crucial to remember a fundamental truth. Genuine spiritual comfort does not operate on algorithmic panic, nor does it demand your money or your frantic engagement to prove your worth. Any message that requires you to succumb to fear, isolate yourself from loved ones, or empty your wallet in exchange for a financial breakthrough or God's love is a human manipulation, not a heavenly decree. To safely navigate this perilous digital landscape, we must arm ourselves with critical thinking. Here are 3 golden rules to identify and defend against spiritual manipulation online. 1. Is there a threat? Authentic faith empowers. Manipulation relies on fear. If a video warns of impending doom, secret enemies, or spiritual abandonment for simply scrolling away. It is a psychological trap. 2. Is there forced time pressure? Divine timing is not dictated by a 30-minute countdown or a strict 3-second window to click a subscribe button. Manufactured urgency is explicitly designed to bypass your rational brain. 3. Are there demands for money or algorithmic interaction? Be highly skeptical of content that equates spiritual obedience with buying a coffee, donating via a pinned link, or typing Amen to activate a miracle. True grace is not hidden behind a paywall or an engagement metric. Finally, we must proactively protect the most susceptible among us. Elderly family members, teenage and emotionally distressed individuals are the primary targets for these digital predators. By openly discussing these manipulative tactics, fostering digital literacy, and checking in on our loved ones' mental well-being, we can dismantle the power of these predatory funnels and protect our communities from spiritual extortion.